You are performing this repair at your own risk. We cannot be held responsible for any injuries or damages that result from attempting this repair. In this video, we'll be demonstrating how to replace the front glass on the iPad Air. This is the most common situation where you have a cracked front glass, however the device still functions properly. You'll also see how to replace the LCD screen if necessary. The LCD screen would need to be replaced if it has dead lines, pixels, or is bleeding. A white screen can also be fixed by replacing the LCD. For this repair, we'll need our standard toolkit, packaging tape, which will hold the glass together during the removal, our replacement screen, and pre-cut adhesive strips. The replacement screen includes a glass and digitizer combo, which is necessary as you cannot separate these components, 12 plastic clamps, which will be used to fuse the new screen to the adhesive strips securely, a heat gun or hair dryer, which will be used to heat up the original glass, softening the adhesive and allowing you to remove it, a compressed air canister to clear the screen of dust and residue before you go to close it, and finally, we recommend rubber gloves and safety glasses to protect your hands and eyes from the glass shards. Our first step is to power off the iPad. Our next step will be to heat up the perimeter of the screen and take our metal pry tool, which is very thin, and get it in between the glass and the perimeter of the casing. Now there's a very, very tiny gap, if any, between the glass and the metal bezel. However, the casing is somewhat flexible, so is the glass, and this will allow us to actually get our tool in there. And once we have the tool inserted in one area of the screen, what we'll be able to do is continue to heat around the perimeter in the area that we're working and slide this tool around the perimeter, being careful in a couple areas to note, and this will allow us to free the screen from the adhesive for removal. Now in our case, the screen is not cracked. This is for demonstration purposes only. However, it's a good idea to apply packaging tape over the affected areas to keep the glass together during the removal process. Now this will be the most important and most difficult step, is initially wedging the metal pry tool underneath of the glass. We'll choose an area, heat up that area, wedge the metal pry tool beneath the glass, and then once we get it underneath the glass, we want to keep it at the same plane or same level as the glass. The metal pry tool should be in line with the glass, and then we can gradually slide it around the sides while applying heat in the area that we're working, and it will free the glass from the adhesive. We don't want to bend the pry tool down or upwards in an effort to try to push the glass away from the adhesive, because then you risk cracking the glass even more. And the idea is to keep the glass in as many solid pieces as possible to make the removal as easy as possible. If you're prying upward in a specific area, what you're going to do is apply a lot of force to a small portion of the glass and it will crack. Now we'll just be working our way around the perimeter, heating up the glass in the area that we're working, and sliding the metal pry tool along to free the glass from the adhesive. Now there are areas of the screen that you'll need to watch out for as you're working your way around the perimeter. Up top here is the first area. Now in our case we have the Wi-Fi version. However, if you have this 3G or cellular version, there will be two antennas up here on opposite sides of the front-facing camera. You'll need to be careful of these areas as the antennas tend to stick to the glass. Now if you do happen to damage any of these components that we're pointing out, they are replaceable. It's just a little more work, but these parts can be found on our website. Along the majority of this side, we don't have much to worry about. However, note that the LCD does come closer to the edge on the sides than at the top and bottom. So we want to be careful not to wedge our tool too far in and risk damaging the actual LCD display, which is beneath the glass. The power volume flex cable in this top area is protected, unlike previous versions of the iPad. Now this part of the video is sped up. It's 2 times the speed. You shouldn't rush to remove the glass. Work your way around the perimeter, slowly sliding the tool along the edge and heating it up as needed. There's no need to rush. If you do so, you risk cracking the screen and making the removal process much more difficult. Now at this point, we need to stop. Be extremely careful as the home button flex cable wraps around this area, and I would say that this is most commonly damaged during this repair. If you watch the video all the way through, you'll see what I'm talking about, and you'll better understand how to look out for this cable. For now, we'll work on the opposite side of the screen, and on this side we don't have anything to worry about except for the LCD being close to the edge as mentioned earlier. Once again, this portion of the video is sped up for time purposes. We want to keep the video as short as possible and only show what's necessary to get the point across for this repair. However, remember to take your time during the removal of the glass. Now at this bottom portion, we do have a couple things to note. The home button, which was mentioned earlier, which extends on the right side of the home button and wraps around the edge on the right side. Also on each side of the home button, there's a Wi-Fi cable. There's a pair of Wi-Fi antennas that we need to be careful of. So we don't want to insert the metal pry tool very far in these areas. And we want to use a lot of heat so that the adhesive does not stick to these components, which may pull them up and damage them, requiring us to replace additional parts when really we're only needing to replace the glass. Since this is the last side of the screen that we're needing to free from the adhesive, we should mention how the glass will be opened. And that's to the right. If you're looking at the iPad face up with the home button at the bottom, it'll be to the right side, just like a book cover, however, in the opposite side of a book. The reason that we open it up to the right is because we still have the digitizer cables, as well as a home button cable that are attached to the inside. And now watch here as we free the remainder of the screen from the adhesive and open up the screen. Do not force the glass open. If it appears to be stuck somewhere, or if it's giving you trouble, apply more heat and free the adhesive that's preventing the glass from opening. Be sure that it's not components that are stuck to the glass that are preventing the glass from coming up. If this is the case, you need to carefully free these components, unstick them from the glass before opening the glass, otherwise you risk damaging these parts. Apply heat as needed, carefully free the remainder of the adhesive, and the glass should open up to the side just like a book cover. Here you can see the location of the fragile home button flex cable as it wraps around the side. With the screen open, we'll now move our attention to the home button, which we'll remove from the original screen, as this will need to be installed on our replacement. The home button is held on with adhesive, so we'll start this process by heating up the area. Next, we can grab our metal pry tool and wedge it underneath the areas shown, which will free the home button from its adhesive. We can then carefully peel the cable off from the original screen, freeing it entirely. One thing to note is that you want to be careful to pull in the direction of the turn when you're removing this cable so that you don't tear it. Now to remove the plastic home button that's seen on the outside of the screen, simply push up from the opposite side and it'll come right out. Our next step is to remove the LCD screen. We have 4 Phillips screws in each corner of the LCD that will need to be removed. The 2 screws at the top are hidden by black tape. Push the Phillips head down into the screw, and once it sits inside the screw, you can remove it no problem. If you feel more comfortable leaving the black tape undamaged, you can peel it back and access the screws that way, but it's not necessary. Next, we'll lift up on one of the corners of the LCD to start the removal process. The LCD cable plugs in the lower portion, and we'll show that here, so be careful when you're lifting out the LCD because it's still attached to the inside of the iPad. At all costs, avoid getting fingerprints or adhesive on the surface of the LCD screen because it's very difficult to remove. Next, we have 3 small Phillips head screws to remove, which will allow us to remove this metal cover and expose the plugs for the LCD, digitizer, and home button flex cable. Using your plastic non-conductive pry tool, lift up on this metal cover. You'll notice that the LCD cable is adhered to this metal cover by a light adhesive, so that will unplug as you lift up the cover. Again, using the non-conductive plastic pry tool, carefully get beneath the 2 digitizer cables and gently lift upwards, unplugging them from their ports. Be sure that the home button cable is completely separate from the screen at this point so that it doesn't tear. Now we'll be removing a few components from the original screen, which will need to be swapped onto our replacement. These components are held on with a light adhesive, and you can simply remove them with a little bit of heat and the metal pry tool. Remove the small ring associated with the home button. In case your home button flex cable suffered any damage, we'll now show how to go about replacing this part. It's quite straightforward. You have to simply remove a black piece of tape covering the port, lift up on a tab, and that will allow you to slide the cable out from its port. To reinstall the new part, simply work backwards. Insert the cable all the way into the port, and then flip the black tab down, which will lock it in place. Continuing on, work your way around the perimeter of the iPad, scraping away any excess adhesive or broken glass that remains. Here we're preparing the new screen for installation. We're removing the plastic protectors from the inner perimeter of the screen, but we want to keep the large square in the center, which will protect it from dust and fingerprints and anything else up until the point of install. We're also going to reinstall the camera bracket and home button at this point. The foam piece here is simply stuck on with a light adhesive and is there to keep the cable securely in place. Next, to reinstall the home button flex cable and bracket, make sure the openings shown here line up with the extensions coming off of the home button. This piece simply sticks onto the screen, and the remaining adhesive from removal of the original screen should be enough to hold it onto the replacement. If not, you can use double-sided tape or super glue gel. You'll want to test and verify the home button to make sure that the press feels normal. If not, you'll need to readjust or realign some part of the home button. Our next step is to reinstall the camera bracket. Now, one note is that we do have these screens available with the home button as well as the camera bracket pre-installed. This will save you a lot of time and hassle in the repair process. However, this part is more expensive. And here's the camera spacer and alignment piece, which we can put on the inside of the iPad. It'll tend to come up with a screen because it sticks to the adhesive, but we don't need to stick it to the screen for the install. We just need to set it flush around the camera, which will make sure that the camera sits in the proper orientation. Our next step is to install the pre-cut adhesive strips around the inner perimeter of the iPad. Each piece of tape is specially cut to fit in a specific spot, so be sure that you place them correctly around the perimeter. Use a small flathead screwdriver or a plastic pry tool to make sure that the tape sits flush close to the bezel. Our next step is to plug in the cables associated with the screen assembly, starting with the home button cable. So carefully slide the cable into the port and then flip down the black tab as shown. Next, we'll be plugging in the two digitizer cables associated with the touchscreen. These simply snap into their ports. Once they're positioned properly over the ports, they won't really slide around much, and you can gently press down and they'll snap into place. Next, we'll be plugging in the LCD screen. We'll position it as shown. Snap in this cable just like the other two. And then we can go ahead and reinstall the screws that are holding this metal plate before laying our LCD screen flush. If you're installing a brand new LCD screen, you would have to remove this metal cover that's over the plug. It's simply held to the connector of the LCD screen with adhesive, so it would peel right off. We're now ready to lay the LCD screen flush inside the iPad. We will have to tuck the screw corners underneath the adhesive. So note the location of these screw mounts and the adhesive. What we'll have to do is peel back the adhesive in order to expose the opening for the screw while we insert the 4 screws on each corner of the LCD screen. Our next step is to peel off the paper backing on the double-sided adhesive strips. This last piece is somewhat tricky because we have the digitizer cables and home button cable to work around. Now is a great time to make sure that there is no dust or residue on the surface of the LCD screen or the inner surface of the glass. We'll now start to fold the screen over. Once we have it at about a 90-degree angle, we'll peel off the plastic protector, which will ensure that no dust falling through the air gets on it at this point. And immediately after we peel off this plastic protector, we'll need to set the side of the screen with the cables on it flush first, and then work our way around the perimeter. Watch closely here as this process is demonstrated in the video, until all sides of the screen are flush. It will be closed similar to a book cover. Our final step is to apply our 12 plastic clamps around the perimeter of the iPad to allow the new screen to securely set with the adhesive. You can find all the parts and tools required for this repair and many others at gadgetmenders.com. Thanks for watching.